5 years ago, my god, has it really been 5 years? Where did life go? Anyway, 5 years ago, I made a video about kooky MMA conspiracies, and you guys just absolutely loved it. And so today I thought it would be fun to dive down the rabbit hole of insanity in this community yet again to talk about more tinfoil-coated ideas fans have had about the shady goings-on in this sport. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A huge thank you to our channel Hall of Famers for all their support, and this is 10 more really weird MMA conspiracies. Number 10, a truly early stoppage. I love random-ass conspiracy theories like this one, and I have to admit, I did not know about this incident until researching it for this video. It's a pretty wild scenario. So, the feature bout of UFC 123 was between Gerald Harris and a debuting Michael Falco. Harris had been a hot hand recently, with 3 straight wins since debuting in the promotion and scoring 2 knockout of the night bonuses.
He's got real good hands, a very powerful right hook, an extremely strong young man.
Towards the end of the first round, Harris found himself in a deep choke, but was saved by the horn.
Wow!
The only problem is, the horn sounded 7 seconds early. Harris would have absolutely tapped or slept. Now, by the time the horn sounded, the UFC had already removed the clock from the screen as they always do, but they had just done so a second earlier. Many fans, who never even realized that the clock went away right before the end of the round, claimed that the UFC took the clock away so they could blow the horn and save their hot prospect, who would go on to lose via UD anyway. Guess they couldn't control that. A formal complaint was made against the timekeeper, and UFC exec Mark Ratner told MMA Junkie in a reply to the conspiracy theories that, quote, "There's no conspiracy."
I don't believe you.
Now, he went on to say the timekeeper errors occasionally happen. Definitely a bizarre moment, but I'm not buying foul play unless the timekeeper had money on it going past the first round or something. Oh shit, maybe that is it. I'm just kidding. Don't sue us, timekeeper. Number 9, Scalegate. Yep, just like his best bud DC, Khabib Nurmagomedov had his own controversial weigh-in moment, except he didn't need to do anything like push down on a towel. The official did it for him.
Allegedly.
Probably by accident, but not according to many. So Khabib, big 155er, comes to the scale for his title defense against Justin Gaethje in Abu Dhabi, looking like the little alien inside the guy's head in Men in Black. They gotta get the towel out, he's struggling, but he hits the scale and he makes champion weight 155 on the dot. But wait, did he? Now, I'm sure fans were already chatting this up immediately after it happened, but it gained mainstream traction thanks to a video by Mike Dolce that amassed 500,000 views. Dolce pointed out that as the official is clearing the scale, the indicator is still moving upwards. And yeah, it's true. That thing definitely hadn't stopped moving, and it was definitely going up. So he probably wasn't on weight yet. Now, this was his first attempt, so he certainly could have made weight if forced to try a second time, maybe just do the DC towel thing, but no. And oddly enough, the official didn't handle other weigh-ins like Khabib's that day. It's the only time he cleared it that fast, only adding fuel to the conspiracy theories that the UFC in Abu Dhabi, so in much more control, gave Khabib a break so he could make the weight, make the main event, and make them money. It's a fun theory, but I'm gonna go ahead and chalk this up to Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Number 8, UFC plants. Not like the ones sitting on your windowsill. I'm talking about fake fans, fake influencers, sock puppet accounts making comments on every possible platform, bought and paid for by the UFC to infiltrate our spaces and control the narrative. It's one of those things that might have sounded absurd 10 years ago, but of all the conspiracies in this video, this one certainly has the most legs. If you've been around MMA for any amount of time, at one point or another, you've been called a UFC shill. But do they really exist? Back when the MMA community was more centralized on forums like the Underground or Sherdog, accounts that were always a bit too pro-UFC or seemed to have information that nobody else did were often accused of shillery. The most infamous example being the legendary Cindy O on the Underground, who had so much access to Dana White and was so fervently pro-UFC that many accused the account of being Dana White himself on a burner, something that would be proved false when Cindy was the subject of a lawsuit. An email chain obtained by Middle Easy showed Spike TV executives planning on releasing a clip from season 4 of Tough Online, made to look like the clip was stolen and released by some rogue production member, with one part of the email mentioning hammering the message boards posing as fans, all apparently with Dana's approval. So we literally have an email email that is talking about paid UFC commenters. And without giving any information that I shouldn't or couldn't, I will say that I do know personally that at least in 2013 or so, there were people who worked for the UFC whose job was to monitor the conversation on social media and on forums from the fans. Whether they got actively involved posing as fans, I do not know, but however involved the UFC is in the fandom itself, it's a suspicion that will likely never go away, as any positive talk about the promotion will inevitably get larger voices accused of being paid shills. Number 7, the real reason Conor backed out of 303. Sometimes an explanation is just too simple for people to accept, and Conor backing out of his Michael Chandler fight at UFC 303 is a great example. Just 2 weeks before the fight, it was announced that the bout, which was, I think, 26 years in the making, would no longer be taking place, as Conor had an undisclosed injury. Well, whenever you don't disclose something, people will speculate, and all sorts of rumors and theories were flying. Conor backed out because he wanted more money. He was in rehab. He was going to jail. He didn't even train for the fight at all, and they claimed an injury to save face. Now, eventually, it would be revealed that McGregor broke his pinky toe, but to the average fan, it seemed like an injury too small for such a huge fight to be off. The conspiracies were so popular that Jim Rome asked Dana White about it on his show.
Because you've heard all the conspiracy theories about Conor. He's not really hurt. He really just wants to negotiate.
Conor McGregor has never done that. Conor McGregor is hurt right now. It's absolutely real.
Months later, Jake Paul would stoke the fire even more with the implication that the UFC canceled the bout so that they could use Conor as leverage for a new rights deal.
Conor has 2 fights left on his fight deal, but the UFC is trying to renew their rights deal. A part of that negotiation is, hey, we have Conor McGregor for 2 more fights. But if he were to fight now, that wouldn't be a part of the negotiation. The company would be like, oh yeah, well, you only have Conor for one fight.
So what really happened? The toe seems plausible enough to me because I think Conor is terrified of getting in the cage in a half-ass state and failing to get a victory for the first time in 5 years. But that's just my opinion. Number 6, Anderson Silva's loaded gloves. One of the weirdest fights of all time is Anderson Silva's middleweight title defense against Damian Maia. Silva just kind of did a whole lot of nothing for the vast majority of it, and it pissed a bunch of people off.
He feels that he doesn't owe the fans an apology. Yet I'm apologizing. I didn't go in and fight like a jackass for 5 rounds. I didn't do what he did tonight.
One aspect of the fight that has always fascinated me, though, long before I researched this video, was the amount of damage that Silva caused to Maia's face over the course of rounds 3 and 4. Despite landing 12 punches to the face during that period, Damian looked like hamburger in the 5th. Well, it turns out conspiracy theorists have an answer for me. I have never noticed this, but Silva's gloves are not taped. They're just not taped. He has on wraps, he has on the gloves. There's no tape around the wrist. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, and fans on forums over the years have speculated that Silva's team loaded up his gloves since they had access to them, and that is why he caused so much damage. Now, this is just silly, of course. It's far more likely that the UFC regulating themselves since they were in Abu Dhabi just fucked up, you know? And Anderson, being one of the greatest strikers ever, can do that to your face really fast. And while in my initial research it appeared to only be a forum discussion, YouTuber Lionel Rivera MMA posted about the conspiracy in a short that garnered 22,000 likes and nearly 500k views, which is a lot more traction than many of the conspiracies in both of our videos on this topic. So between that and my shock at finding out that he had no tape, I had to include this one. Number 5, Leslie Smith's firing. Okay, this is gonna be one of those entries where I tread very lightly, so get ready for lots of qualifiers. While on a 2-fight win streak, Leslie Smith was set to take on Aspen Ladd. Ladd missed weight by 2 pounds, and instead of making a catchweight bout like normal, Smith and her lawyer Lucas Middlebrook claimed the UFC gave Leslie her show and win money and told her that her contract was complete. They even waived matching rights.
We're just going to pay you your show and your win. It's going to count as your last fight on the contract, and we have no interest in renegotiating another fight with you.
2 months prior, Smith had helped found Project Spearhead, a fighter unionization effort.
Baseball, hockey, soccer, basketball, they all have unions to protect their athletes. Collective bargaining is going to allow the fighters to come together on the issues that matter the most.
Leslie believed her release was in retaliation for Spearhead and filed a complaint against the UFC with the National Labor Relations Board. Because she filed in New Jersey, where the bout was going to take place, the case was taken up by the NLRB Region 4 office in Pennsylvania. Her lawyer Middlebrook claims Region 4 called him up and said that after reviewing her case, they were going to file a complaint against the UFC. But 7 hours later, the case had been reassigned to the DC office of the NLRB. And here's where the conspiracy comes in, because the DC office dismissed her case. The head of that office was an appointee of then President Donald Trump. Middlebrook claims that 3 days after he met with the DC office, Dana White had a 3-hour dinner meeting with the president, and he believes that, quote, DC's decision was nothing but the result of a political stranglehold. But why would the UFC go to all that alleged effort over Leslie Smith? Well, according to Middlebrook, it was because the case would determine whether Smith was an employee of the UFC or not, and that, quote, their entire business model hung in the balance if a federal agency said, yes, these fighters are employees. Labor law is way above my pay grade, but it very much sounds to me like Smith and Middlebrook believe the UFC and the US government conspired against them to get the case thrown out. Number 4, the artificial sugar show. Anytime there's a decision that just makes zero sense in a high-profile fight, instead of chalking it up to incompetence or scoring criteria sucking, many fans choose to cry foul and claim that the fix was in. I think perhaps Noah O'Brien 14 on Twitter summarized the fan sentiment best when he wrote, nah, UFC is so fucking rigged, hashtag UFC 280, you can suck my balls, fuck you at Sugar Sean MMA. But what makes the Sean O'Malley versus Petr Yan conspiracies so much more intriguing is all the reasons and ways fans believed the UFC intervened. Like, sure, they rigged the cards according to this theory, but it goes so much further than that. Every detail about the fight played into it. Why was the bout in Abu Dhabi? Well, there's no commission, so they can better manipulate the judges, while self-regulating, of course. The bout was not made the main event of a fight night in the US, where Sean is popular, and instead placed as the feature bout for UFC 280, so they could justify it being only 3 rounds, which fans speculated favored O'Malley. But I thought they were on the card because it was a title eliminator for Aljamain Sterling. Oh, that's because you're a sheep. If you recall, seemingly out of nowhere, Henry Cejudo was brought in to fight Aljo, something Sterling himself was perplexed by.
Is this for real? You guys told me O'Malley, now all of a sudden we're talking about Henry. I'm like, Henry's been retired for 3 years, almost 3 years.
Was Cejudo chosen to take out Aljo and make way for an easier matchup for future star O'Malley, even though they have very similar skill sets? Yep, according to this conspiracy theory, that's exactly what happened. Dana might as well have booked the Sphere that night, it was so locked in. Number 3, Rockholds staged KO. One of my favorite entries on our previous video about MMA conspiracies was about Benson Henderson signaling Anthony Pettis to give him the Showtime kick.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You are a fucking idiot.
And to my delight, another very similar conspiracy popped up about Luke Rockholds' loss to Vitor Belfort, and was so prominent that Luke addressed it after the fight. Okay, so it's your classic conspiracy setup. Something happens that nobody is expecting, and therefore there must be more to it than it's simply happening. Rockhold was making his debut from Strikeforce. He was going to be the second coming of Anderson Silva, and then he got KO'd by Vitor Belfort using a random-ass spinning heel kick. Had to be a setup. Some kind of sacrifice to the Freemasons or something. And oh my God, would you look at that? Proof. At 2:35 of the very first round, Rockhold inexplicably nods to Vitor Belfort, of course signaling that it's time for the knockout kick. Forget the fact that Luke then tries to avoid being kicked, or that earlier in the fight both men threw strikes that could easily have ended the bout, or that, you know, there would be far less conspicuous ways to signal that it was time for your planned concussion. In a now inaccessible tweet after the bout, Rockhold addressed the allegations, saying, hearing some talk about my fight with Belfort being a fix. No amount of money would make me ever consider taking a fall. I got caught, I lost. Exactly what a puppet of the Illuminati would say. Number 2, UFC 279 bait and switch. A lot of people hated the idea of UFC 279's main event the second it was announced. Why in the world was Nate Diaz in the final fight of his contract going to be fed to this monster Khamzat Chimaev? It just didn't make any sense, but as fate would have it, Boers would miss weight by a whole 7.5 pounds.
Missed it by that much.
And so the UFC rearranged half the main card the day before the show, and Nate ended up fighting Tony Ferguson, while Khamzat would take on Kevin Holland. A much better card by accident. Or was it by accident? Everything seemed to work out just a bit too perfectly, and fans began to speculate that some chicanery was afoot. The popular theory was that the UFC saw how poorly the card was trending, and so had Chimaev not even try to cut weight. That way they would have a reason to rearrange the card. The popular theory was spread by influential figures like comedian Brendan Schaub on one of his podcasts.
I just think it wasn't trending well. They had this kind of as a plan B, right? And it was a great plan B. And they were able to pull it off if the audience weren't buying into it, which to their surprise, we didn't buy into it.
The speculation got around to Dana White, who miscredited and went off on known conspiracy theorist Pat Miletich for spreading the idea.
I don't know if Pat really said that, but if he did, he has to be the dumbest motherfucker on the planet.
Someone would let Dana know at the end of the presser that it was actually Schaub, to hilarious results.
That makes sense. Bye.
Number 1, Dana ended Affliction. Now, we have told the story of the ill-fated Affliction fight promotion on this channel many times. Fedor was their big draw. He was to fight Josh Barnett to headline their third show. Barnett got popped by CSAC. The card got canceled. Affliction MMA folded without the revenue from the event. But because of the extraordinary and sudden collapse, along with quite a few dubious circumstances, conspiracy theories were aplenty about the real reason it all went down. See, Affliction had found a new opponent for Fedor, Vitor Belfort, but at the 11th hour, simply canceled the card anyway, believing it wouldn't make enough money. I don't know about you, but I feel like Vitor Belfort and Josh Barnett not exactly tipping the scales here. It was more about Fedor. It gets even weirder though, because then just hours after folding up shop, the promotion announced a partnership with the UFC as a clothing provider. The speed of the new deal had fans speculating that Dana White was somehow involved in Affliction's demise. Further fueling the theory was the fact that this was the first ever random test performed by CSAC, with some fans believing White had them test Barnett knowing he would fail. Other theories have Dana stepping in after Barnett tested positive and seizing on the opportunity, paying Tom Atencio to fold up shop for good despite having Belfort as a backup. Given their combative nature, the UFC had put on counter-programming in the form of a free Anderson Silva fight the night of Affliction's first event, so it is certainly true that they were concerned about the promotion. Interestingly, I found a quote from Barnett after his failure in a Yahoo article where he inexplicably says it's not a big conspiracy. No context is given, but to me, it implies him addressing rumors floating around the community that week. Now, all that said, I think this one is totally bunk, as there is just no evidence to prove any of it. But I do understand why fans at the time thought White might have had a hand in Affliction's destruction. And it's a really fun theory. It paints Dana as this Machiavellian figure, masterfully sabotaging his competition like some kind of supervillain. You know who didn't kill Affliction though? The editor of this video, Max Randall. Please follow him on all his socials, go check out his awesome YouTube channel, and go say something nice to him. A big shout out to our channel Hall of Fame members. You guys are truly awesome. I cannot thank you enough. Fight fans, hit the join button, become a member, get exclusive content. I would highly recommend it. Like and subscribe to signal Vitor Belfort to knock you out. Leave a comment about your favorite conspiracy theories in the sport, or whether you believe any of these. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there.